Aston Martin's Vantage is a modern high-performance icon of unmistakable character, styled to seduce and engineered to thrill. It's the most affordable supercar the British brand makes, but many will tell you that it's arguably also the very best. For the most part, there's V8 rather than V12 power under the bonnet, but the performance is still as sensational as its looks, either in coupe form or as a Roadster convertible. It was the first Aston Martin to directly take on Porsche and Maserati, and it remains an emotional but very tempting choice.
There was a time late in the last century when Aston Martin meant something very different. An iconic British brand, to be sure, but a maker of hand-built sports cars aimed at older buyers, romanced by name and heritage in the face of compelling evidence that German and Italian rivals were better built and finer to drive. Now, the gorgeous DB9 of 2003 was a sign that the future might be different, but it was still an old-style GT rather than an out-and-out sports car. The kind of design still most likely to appeal to Aston enthusiasts. A slightly smaller model with a younger, more dynamic orientation was needed. The kind of car likely to appeal to someone with little prior interest in the brand. The kind of car you could seriously choose over a Porsche 911 or a Maserati GT. A car like this one, Aston Martin's Vantage.
Launched in 2005, this was the first thing the Gaydon factory had made that really worried German and Italian rivals. It was slightly more affordable for a start, so would sell in rather larger numbers than Aston's hand-built GTs further up the range. And it was fast, light on its feet, and styled to be achingly desirable, either in coupe form or in subsequent open-topped Roadster guise. Rivals consoled themselves that the original model's 4.3-litre V8 sounded faster than it actually went, but that was dealt with in 2008 with the installation instead of a 4.7-litre unit that boosted power by 11% to 420 brake horsepower.
Those needing more could opt to have Aston's fearsome 6-litre V12 installed beneath the bonnet, or tweak the V8 package by opting for the N420 model with its sports exhaust and stiffer setup. The best choice of all, perhaps, was the V8S model that most customers now buy, with its bigger brakes, sharper steering and suspension, and 7-speed sequential shift semi-automatic gearbox. So, Advantage Aston? Let's find out. Here at last is an Aston Martin for which no apologies need be made, no caveats given. Faster models further up the range remain largely at heart old-school GTs. True sports cars certainly, but cars that trade the last ounce of handling finesse for an important dose of day-to-day usability. Now, this Vantage must be a car that its owners could use every day too, but from the moment you slip behind the wheel, it's clear that it's also a car that you might be tempted to take around Silverstone on your way to Sainsbury's. Now, the reasons why aren't all about power, but let's start with that first.
Freed by private ownership from having to worry about clashes with Jaguar's XKR, the 32-valve V8 engine that most usually beats beneath the bonnet is these days free to fulfill its potential, bored out to 4.7 litres and good for 420 brake horsepower in standard form or 430 brake horsepower in the V8S. Either way, the barking rasp you get after slotting the ECU ignition key into the centre of the dash and firing things up speaks of the kind of supercar potency you'd expect after spending a six-figure sum. 60 from rest will detain you for just 4.8 seconds in a standard Vantage on the way to 180 miles an hour. The best bit being when the bypass valve opens in the exhaust at around 4,000 RPM so that you can fully enjoy the glorious soundtrack. The performance figures improved to 4.5 seconds and 189 miles an hour in the Vantage S with its extra grunt and slick 7-speed sport shift semi-auto transmission, and make it hard to justify the extra money you'll need to pay to go only slightly faster in the 6-litre V12 version. That's 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds en route to 190 miles an hour.
Now you can see why so many Vantage customers choose the Sport Shift sequential box over the conventional 6-speed manual transmission that I've got here. For a start, it's the only option if you want the advantages of the V8 S model with its widened stance, its extra 10 brake horsepower, extra power, its bigger brakes and its sharper steering and suspension. But it isn't only that. In many ways, this semi-automatic box suits the character, the demeanour of this car so much better. With the lovely magnesium alloy paddles behind the steering wheel, so much fun to use that you're rarely tempted to default back to fully automatic mode. Now this car uses dual throttle mapping, which gives a comfort mode in which the responses to throttle inputs from the engine are progressive and smoother, and there's also a selectable sports mode in which the engine mapping is more aggressive, giving a more dynamic and more sporting feel. So far so good, but plenty of power and a slick gearbox do not alone a driver's car make.
So you'll want to point this car at your favourite twisting secondary road to see if it really is a 911, an M6 or an Audi R8 alternative. It is. This, without doubt, is my favourite Aston Martin. Lithe and lighter on its feet not only than a DB9, which you'd expect, but also than a Virage or a DBS, which you might not. There isn't quite the last nth of steering and road feel that you get in a 911 or an R8, but the Vantage compensates with a suppler ride that feels better with mid-corner bumps, and the grip and balance in the bends inspires a degree of confidence that I never thought I'd feel in an Aston Martin.
You can make everything stiffer still by specifying other versions with an optional sports pack, but I don't think I'd want to. This is how an Aston should be. Now, it's only when you put a Vantage up against one of Aston's other models that you really appreciate the differences in design. It's over a foot shorter than, say, a DB9 and 60mm lower slung. If you were to put the two cars side by side, the DB9 would be revealed as the GT car it is, while the Vantage sits four square, its big rear wheel arch bulges, lending it a pugnacious muscularity. This is widely acclaimed as one of the world's most beautiful cars, a lesson in proportion, stance and sculptural form. The long, low, sweeping bonnet and broad rear haunches suggest power and aggression. Pure and understated, yet studded with simple, confident detailing, the Vantage is unmistakably Aston Martin. Subtle differences distinguish the three main Vantage models, with S and V12 variants showcasing various aerodynamic refinements borrowed from the company's GT4 racing program. There's a deeper front bumper with a more aggressive carbon fibre splitter to pluck more downforce from the airflow and give greater stability at speed, whilst more pronounced side sills reduce aerodynamic lift and give greater definition to the flanks. At the rear of, say, the Coupe version of the Vantage S, the tailgate would be shaped into an upswept flip, again to reduce lift, whilst a carbon fibre diffuser would be added to help extract air from underneath the car. Here though, as you can see, I've gone for the gorgeous open-top Roadster version, a model with styling apparently intended to evoke the look of an athlete wearing a skin-tight suit. Now, it's an analogy that doesn't work quite as well as the thin-sillet fabric roof, which opens or lowers in just 18 seconds at speeds of up to 30 miles an hour and stores compactly when down underneath an aluminium tonneau cover.
Interiors have never been an Aston Martin problem, and from the moment that the gently assisted swan wing door swings open in a graceful upwards arc and you slide into the supportive driver's seat that sets you low in the car, you know you're about to experience something very special. From the soft, supple, hand-stitched leather that sways the seats, dashboard and door panels, to the intricate aluminium-faced instruments designed to resemble the technical look of a chronograph watch, everything you touch and feel has been as carefully crafted as a Swiss watch or a Savile Row suit.
I'm not quite so sure about the ECU, or emotional control unit, a square block that replaces a conventional ignition key or starter button and slots into the middle of the centre console to start the engine. Overall, this cabin remains one of Aston's best efforts to date, much of its architecture and components shared with the DB9. That does mean, though, that this Vantage shares that car's problem in having rather too many knobs and buttons scattered around the dash, in an age where many cheaper brands habitually group all these functions together into iDrive-style control systems. It also, unfortunately, shares the DB9's rather fiddly Volvo-sourced satellite navigation system. Behind the front seats, there's no attempt to incorporate the rear seats you get in larger Aston models. Instead, in the Coupe, you get a carpeted area big enough to hold a briefcase and complete with some lovely aluminium rollover spars, while in this Roadster it's all a bit tighter. You just get this tiny compartment. Doing without back seats has helped optimise space for driver and passenger. And that means that there's enough room here for 6-footers, while the width of the cabin and the broad transmission tunnel will make banging elbows a distant memory. Out back, the 300-litre boot that you get in the Coupe model is big enough for 2 sets of golf clubs, and significantly bigger than some rivals. But if, as I have here, you opt for the Roadster convertible, then capacity falls quite substantially to 144 litres.
Expect to pay somewhere in the £90,000 to £110,000 bracket for your V8 Vantage, so about £10,000 to £15,000 more than an equivalent Porsche 911, but about the same as a Maserati Gran Turismo. If you're looking at the standard 420 brake horsepower Vantage, the Sport Shift semi-automatic transmission that most want is £3,000 more. And in either form, you can pay a couple of £1,000s more for the stiffer N420 model with its sports exhaust.
But if you can afford it, it's probably better to put that money towards the £6,500 premium over the V8 Sport Shift that you'll need to put yourself behind the wheel of the V8S model that most customers choose. Now, this comes only with 7-speed Sport Shift transmission, 10 brake horsepower more power, a wider stance, quicker steering, bigger brakes and recalibrated suspension. But whichever V8 Vantage model you end up deciding upon, there's the option of paying an £8,000 premium and ordering it in the open-top Roadster form that I've got here. Only the flagship V12 Vantage model comes in coupe form only, with a £135,000 price tag that makes it a more sporting alternative to the similarly priced and similarly engined DB9. The V8 engine, in contrast, is exclusive to the Vantage, and it's quite quick enough to make buyers question the need to spend £50,000 or £80,000 more respectively on either Aston Martin's Virage or DBS models.
Whichever Vantage Coupe or Roadster model you choose, the standard V8 with manual or sport shift transmission, or the V8S, or indeed the V12 Coupe, you'll find it very well equipped, as you would expect given the near 6-figure budget needed for ownership. Surprisingly, cruise control, satellite navigation and heated seats are all options, and it would have been nice to see a tracker system fitted as standard to return the car to you should it be stolen. Still, you do get gorgeous 19-inch alloy wheels, full leather trim, power folding mirrors, electrically adjustable sports seats, tyre pressure monitoring, parking sensors, a trip computer, climate control and a 160-watt audio system.
But of course, that's just the start. I'd want to add an Alcantara trim steering wheel and carbon sports seats to give a racy edge, and of course there are plenty of other tempting options. And Aston Martin is, after all, a bespoke motorcar, and the list of personable items is lengthy. Safety-wise, it's a bit surprising in this day and age to find curtain airbags missing, but you do get twin front and side bags, plus the usual long list of electronic acronyms to control braking, traction and stability, and hopefully ensure that you'll never have to use them. Now, on V8 S models upwards, there's a track mode on the stability control that loosens wheel slips for cornering heroics, but still leaves you a bit of a safety net. And all Vantage models have a PTC positive torque control system that stops the rear wheels from locking up in emergency situations. The 4.7 litre V8 fitted to most Vantage models may be bigger than the old 4.3, but it still manages to be more economical. Fuel consumption and CO2 figures on average around 13% better. So that means you'll get 20.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle from the 6-speed manual model that I'm driving here. Though I should point out that that figure does fall to a fairly frightening 14.2 miles to the gallon on the urban cycle. If you want to improve on that a little bit, then opting for the Sport Shift transmission gives you 21.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle from the 420 brake horsepower V8 version, and 21.9 miles to the gallon from the 430 horsepower V8S. At least you'll get a decent operating range thanks to a reasonably sized fuel tank. Expect around 300 miles from a tank full. And CO2 figures vary between 299 and 328 grams per kilometre, depending on the V8 variant you choose.
Those in search of the V12 model won't give a second glance to these kinds of figures, but just for the record, it chugs through 17.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and belches out 388 grams per kilometre of CO2. You'd think you could hardly annoy Greenpeace more by attaching a whale harpooning gun to the bonnet. Yet, should you be inveigled into conversation with a bearded type, you could point out that in some ways this car is very green indeed. There's no wasteful recycling needed here because, due to its build, no recycling is needed. There's nothing to rust and nothing to decay. Look after your Aston and it will still be thrilling people in 50 years' time.
Back in the here and now, insurance is of course a top-of-the-shop Group 50, but at least repair and servicing costs shouldn't be too exorbitant. This car is, after all, designed for everyday use and must be affordable as such. And residual values, they're about the same as a Porsche 911, which means that they're very good indeed. Without the Vantage, it's doubtful whether Aston Martin would be the company that it is today. With over 10,000 models sold, this is a car that keeps the tills ringing at Gaydon, and with good reason. For me, it's the best thing the company makes, the best to drive and the best looking. So it's nice that it's the most affordable sports car in the range too. Of course, affordability is a relative term when you're talking about a supercar, costing at least the best part of £100,000, especially one that's brilliant but flawed. The fiddly interior, the muscular handling and the high running costs won't, after all, suit everybody. But for me, those traits are welcome. They make this car human. There is, after all, something soulless about the clinical perfection of a Porsche or a Maserati. And that's why you'll find any Vantage simply overflowing with the kind of special feel that you want in the sports car you've dreamed of owning all your life. More exclusive than a Jaguar XK, more traditional in its layout than a Porsche 911, it's brilliant and it's British. Enough said.